This clip is from the Boundary Riders podcast, and if you do enjoy this, then make sure to check out the full episode out every single Wednesday morning on YouTube and Spotify. But now we get to a topic that has been coming out over the week regarding an in-season tournament into the AFL. So the AFL is considering introducing a secondary tournament that would run during the premiership season, awards millions of dollars as prize money, and could even offer a winning team a spot in the finals. Now, the idea first suggested 18 months ago was raised by the AFL again with their heavyweights, with also Andrew Dillon. And this could potentially come into the AFL when Tasmania joined the competition as the 19th team in 2028. Now, the way that this could work is they would have it through intervals of the AFL season, maybe at the start, maybe have a couple of games, then cut it into the middle, and then towards the finals, or they just have a little patch, like a month, in between June to July, something like that, and then they have the tournament there. So we have the first half of the season, tournament, second half of the season, something like that. So that's the two ideas. And it also seems that the NBA started something like this in 2023, would keep struggling teams and their fans engaged in the season longer, with the winning team could be rewarded up to maybe $5 million, according to some sources. Now, I have actually made a video regarding a AFL Cup or a tournament, I think it was last year, or one of my first video essays that I ever did. And looking at it now, I thought that it would be a good idea back at the time. I really don't like the way they're implementing this idea, the way they're talking about it in the middle of a season. I think that takes away from the AFL itself, the competition that we all grew up watching. I personally think it could work as a pre-season tournament, that you use it as a getting your team ready for the AFL season, which is the mainstay, the main event. That I think could work. Make the NAB Cup, bring it back. Bring the Wizard Cup back. Make it a pre-season tournament to then get your team ready for the season. I don't like the idea of putting it in the middle of the year. You either put it through the year. I think that you have it split around, similar to like maybe the FA Cup in soccer, as they have it in the AFL. Like, you play games midweek. Maybe that's how you could do it. But even then, I don't really like that idea either. Personally, I think that you don't do this. I think this is a bad idea. Now, Sam McClure has reported, I fucking hate this cunt. Anyway, the AFL would want to strip it back to everyone plays each other once. So the main reason why the AFL are thinking of this is because they would cut away games from the AFL season, and then they would have these tournaments. So every single team plays each other once in the AFL campaign, except for your rival, you play twice as like a rivalry round. Now, and you'd also have a gather round, in fact, and then an in-season tournament with worth a lot of money, potentially a final spot for the winner. Now, I think that's not a very great idea either, because how are you going to get a final spot if Collingwood wins that? Like, let's say it was this year, right? If Collingwood won this tournament in tomorrow, because it's supposed to be like the mid-season. We're in July now. Let's say Collingwood win the tournament tomorrow night. Who cares? So it just meant nothing the whole year. Who's going to watch that? Because to say that they're going to keep other fans engaged, that's great in theory. But what happens if they win the FA Cup and they win the AFL's FA Cup and they win the AFL Premiership, or they're on top of the ladder? It's going to mean absolutely nothing, and it's just going to make the top teams more richer while it lessens the opportunities for the lower teams. I don't think this is great at all. In fact, thinking more about it, this is an incredibly bad idea, because it's going to make the better teams more incentivized to try out these tournaments to get more money for their clubs. Because let's say you put a Collingwood against a North Melbourne in round 18, we know Collingwood are going to win. Why would they rest players, Collingwood, if they're playing against North Melbourne when there's a huge money prize for the competition? That's why I think personally it would be a great idea for a pre-season sort of tournament. If they want to do something like this, make it a pre-season tournament. Make it so teams aren't going to use their best players all the time. They will maybe for the bigger finals towards the end of the season, but they're not going to use them for the first couple of games. That means every single person who, like big AFL fans, can watch their teams, look at their young players, see how they're going to go. That's the only way I think it can be implemented. I don't like the idea of having it through the season, because it cheapens the AFL competition as a whole, in my opinion. People like Sam McClure, because I don't know why he wants to be like the Kane Corns that's never played football, so his opinion for most people means less, but he's like, we have to seriously consider this. It's like, no, we don't. This is not a good idea because, like I said, it cheapens the AFL competition as a whole, and it's going to be, I mean, look at how the AFL is at the moment with injuries, by the way. Players are getting injured left, right, and center, and then we're just going to add this in the middle of the year? No way. That's going to make it even worse. Imagine if your best players get injured in this tournament, and then towards the end of the year, you just capitulate. Like, imagine if you're a Collingwood fan. I know I bring up Collingwood a lot, but what happens if in this tournament you bring in, maybe you want to rest them, but if you want to go for this big money prize of maybe a 5 million, I don't know how much it will be, but what you risk a Nick Dacos. He does his ACL, and then you risk a Jamie Elliott, let's say. You've risked those two. They do season-ending injuries. You've just cost yourself a premiership, and you may have lost the tournament as well. There are so many issues that I have with this that it just cheapens the AFL competition, and you're risking so much for a little prize in between. I just don't like the idea at all. And to say that it's going to make other teams more, teams down the bottom, give them more of a engagement, I don't really necessarily buy into that sort of statement, because I think that overall, every single team will want to get the money, right? Yes, you may want to go for the premiership, the AFL season, you may want to rest players, that's understandable. But what happens if the top teams go and win this tournament and they're getting the cash prize? So the bottom teams are going to be the distance between the top teams and the bottom teams is just going to continually grow that gap. Because, I mean, look at it this season. There's 9 teams that are going to make finals, and then the other 9 teams are doing nothing. So why would you want to... Yes, the other 9 teams could potentially say, okay, we're going to forget about the AFL season and focus on the AFL Cup, whatever you want to call it, right? So that means that the rest of the AFL season, these bottom teams are just going to give up on their AFL season and focus on the tournament stuff. So you look at that, look at the Sydney Swans, right? If Sydney didn't care about the AFL season anymore and were only focused on this AFL Cup, then Sydney, do you really think they win last week against Fremantle? Do you really think they're going to give a huge go at it? And, the pressure game that they brought, why would they give a crap about that? It just lessens the impact of the AFL season. So I think it's a terrible idea, to be honest. And I'm usually pretty open to these sort of new innovations in the AFL. Like last week, I was okay with the idea of a wild card round, to be honest. I think it could be a good idea to keep the season alive and keep other teams engaged. I think that's a good idea. If you want other teams and other fans to be engaged, I think that's the route you go down. An in-season tournament, I think, is a terrible idea. I think, like I said, I'll just say this one more time, it cheapens the competition, the AFL, which is what the fans are wanting, and it's going to make a bigger gap on the best teams and the worst teams. Like, how many years do we have to see North Melbourne down the bottom? If you're giving other teams up the top a cash prize, then they're just going to continue to break away from the teams like the North Melbournes, the St Kildas. And I'm talking about those sort of clubs because they're the Victorian clubs that have been down the bottom for so long, right? So why would you want to make that gap even more just to potentially have some sort of tournament in the middle of the year that, North Melbourne could win it and could keep those fans engaged? But what happens if a Brisbane or a Collingwood or a Geelong wins that tournament? Then it just makes those teams even stronger and makes the teams like the North Melbournes of the world even weaker. That's my opinion. That's my thoughts. I would like to hear your guys' opinion on this, because most people at this stage I have seen hate this idea. I would like to actually see a perspective of someone who likes the idea, to be honest, because I would like to hear their perspective, because I don't think this is a good idea at all. I think that it's just going to make the AFL season worse, and it's going to make it less of an impact. Imagine going to win the AFL Premiership and, by round, let's say Collingwood, they drop off in form this year and then someone wins it. So that would be different to if this tournament thing was involved. Nick Dacos and Jamie Elliott get injured. Collingwood's form then drops off and then they lose the grand final. I think it makes it a lot different. It's like, Collingwood would have won the premiership, but their injuries they got in the AFL Cup, that's the reason why they couldn't win it. I just think I think it overall takes away from the AFL competition as a whole, and I don't think that's the right route to go down. I personally think if the AFL want to keep the other fans engaged, you go with a wild card round. You don't do this tournament. If they're going to do a tournament like this in the AFL space, you have to do it in the pre-season I don't even think you can do it postseason because I think everyone would just like, the footy fatigue kind of sets in after the grand final, right? That's why I think a lot of people don't really watch the AFLW is because of football fatigue. I think there's other reasons as well, but overall, I think that's where football fatigue comes in. Everyone at the end of the grand final, it's like, oh, okay, that's a great end to the AFL season, or not last year because Sydney fucking blew it in the grand final day, but overall, people are like, oh, well, that, we have the winner now. So that's why I think it's a pre-season only sort of thought, in my opinion. Again, let me know down below how you guys, if you think it's a good idea, seriously, make sure let me know how you feel, because I want to know why, personally, because I seriously can't see a good reason for an in-season AFL tournament that coincides with the AFL season. I can't see a good reason for it. So if you do have a good reason why it's good, seriously tell me, because I want to actually have some ideas as to why it's good.